Good morning and welcome to the May 21st, 2019, 9 a.m. City of Hutchinson City Council meeting. Bless you. Linda, please call the roll.
Deckend?
Yes,
Dave
here.
Line?
Here.
Soldner? Here. Pyros de Carvalho?
Here.
Inskeep?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Peterson will be saying the prayer for us today. Thank you.
Can I say one thing before I pray?
By all means.
I've been noticing in the newspaper about all the different people that have come into the city and getting, whatever they get to speak. And I was just wondering if it's a possibility that after 26, 27 years of doing this, that you could double our honorarium.
How about triple?
Triple would work.
Okay.
It's just the sense of it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I don't want to obligate us, but I think we'd be willing to pay what we get paid,
Yeah.
which is a big fat zero. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, if you triple what we get paid, it's 3 times 0.
There it
3
is.
times 0.
Thank you.
We better get serious now. Father, we just thank you as we come together. We thank you, Father God, for everything that you can do. And Father, we just thank you that everything we allow you to do, that Father, it'll be accomplished. And thank you for this city, for this council members, and Father, for the leadership. And Father, for all the people that work within the city that's kind of like undercover. You never hear about them or see about them until people start moaning and groaning and griping about situations. But Father, I just thank you that this is a wonderful city. And Father, even though decisions are made that doesn't please everybody, that's just the way it is. And Father, we just thank you for this day, this meeting. And Father, we just pray blessings over it for godly wisdom to flow. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you again. Next item, please.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
Very fine. This is the portion again where we invite those that want to come forward and address the council. We ask that you limit your remarks to 5 minutes and to something that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody who want to take some advantage? Justin.
Good morning, Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities.
Good morning.
I just wanted to give everyone a quick update on the Hutchinson Zoo. Due to the flooding and all the rains, the zoo is closed right now. The pond is way out of its banks. A few of the exhibits are actually underwater. We have moved all the animals away, so all animals will be safe. We will keep everyone posted. Also, we'll be making updates on the website as well as Facebook as far as when we can get the zoo back open again. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate
Justin, and any other than having to move the animals, any particular damage?
Not that we have seen yet. We have one building we're a little bit concerned with, where the ocelot is. We have kind of a holding building. It's the old Bobcat pen that we've converted to the ocelot. It's not completely underwater, but the bottom 2 or 3 feet's underwater. So once the water goes down, we will see what we're
Find
left
out
with.
then.
But so far, that's the only one we're worried about at this point. The groundwater has not crested yet, so I still think we're going to see another 2 or 3 feet of water. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Very good. Rebecca.
Rebecca Starkey-Kiesling, Director of Public Information and Community Engagement. I just want to give you an update on the citizen-led request to rename Avenue A Park. On May 15th, I posted a survey to allow for wider public input. In the last 6 days, we've had nearly 700 responses.
Fantastic.
People have feelings, and they're happy to share them, which is exactly what we wanted. And so I'm excited to say that we are getting some responses on that. We'll have the survey up until June 10th. At that point, I will compile the responses so you have a nice, easy to understand breakdown of what those were, but I'll also provide the raw data in case you want to go in and look at specific areas or anything like that. And yeah, that's all. So hopefully that'll help make and inform the decision. So.
Very good.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
I'm glad to hear about the interest. That's good.
I also did want to mention for those out there with feelings, I notice a lot of people are commenting on the link about the survey, but they're not actually going to complete the survey, and those responses will not be tabulated. So it's very important that you click through to complete the survey.
And you can go to www.hutchgov.com/parkname to go directly to the survey.
Thank you.
Very good, thanks. Anybody else want to address the council?
I should do something. Ryan's going to kill me, but
Oh, here we go.
just wanted to introduce our new planning, John Deerdoff, city manager. Ryan, if you come up, our new planning director started a week ago, Ryan Vitlock, and he comes to us from Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and he's been on the job now a week.
Just over a week.
He came back for a second week, so I just want to take this opportunity to introduce him. And Terry's here from the Planning Commission, was part of the search process, and looking forward to getting him busy with the planning department. So, if you wanted to say something.
Thank you very much, members of the council and Mayor. An honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to taking an already great department and making it even better. We have an awesome staff here, and I'm just here to kind of help give them the tools to do their jobs even better and to make our department run even more efficiently. So, very excited to be here.
Welcome. Great to
Very
have
good.
you.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Yeah,
Welcome
very
very
good.
much. Thank you.
Apologize for the surprise.
Right?
Keep you on your toes.
Always come with prepared remarks, just in case. You never know. Very good. Anybody else who'd like to address the council? Seeing none. Next item.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Cyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7, consider Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
All right. Welcome back.
Good morning, Justin Combs again. So this is for the final presentation of the master plan that we've been working on for what seems like a year. It hasn't quite been that long. It's definitely been a long and a great process. First, I want to give a shout out to Amy Conkling from Hutchinson and to Sean Thomas, Assistant Director of Parks. This process would not have gone near as smoothly and worked as efficiently without their help. So they did a lot of the heavy lifting for this project. As far as the process goes, I was really happy with the process. We got a lot of public input through various methods. So I really feel like the plan really does capture what the community wants and desires, and also does a good job of giving us kind of a roadmap on how to proceed. I didn't find anything in the plan that was just like a big aha moment, like there was this big unknown thing out there, so which I think is good. I think the plan really celebrates what we have. Rice Park, Orchard Park, Cary Park, rated amongst the top 10 of parks throughout the country that these groups have worked on. So I think that was pretty incredible, and I've always preached that, hey, we've got some amazing parks here. So the plan really called that out. The plan also talked about some of our great facilities, Dillon Nature Center, Cary Park Golf Course, and the Hutchinson Zoo were all called out specifically as great assets that we have. The other thing that the plan really does, at least from the parks perspective, is it really pinpoints some of those neighborhood parks that maybe have been a little bit ignored over the past 15, 20 plus years. It doesn't say that we need lots and lots of new parks, that we're short on land. It just says we need to do a better job of taking care of what we have. We have some really great parks. We have some parks that need some work. And so now this plan really gives me a detailed vision, a detailed roadmap on how to proceed, where the best place to spend some of that funding is, that we can impact the most people, and that we can really provide quality parks to everybody here in Hutch. So really happy with the plan, really happy with the process. So also would like to thank Pathways and the leadership team for Pathways. I believe most of them are here. It was through the Pathways grant that we were able to receive the money from Blue Cross Blue Shield that paid for the grant itself, or paid for the master plan. So pretty incredible opportunity that we got to have this quality of master plan at really zero cost to the city and to Hutchinson. I'm very incredible, so very thankful for that opportunity. So, and then also would like to thank Green Play for their work on this plan. They did a fantastic job putting this together. So with that, I would like to invite Pat O'Toole from Green Play up to do the final presentation. And Tony and I are here for questions afterwards, and I'm sure Pat will hang around for questions as well. So.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jess. welcome.
Well, welcome, and welcome back.
Right?
It has been a while. So this is exciting, and I appreciate the council and mayor having us in here to formally do the final presentation. I know you've seen it before, but we have done all the final edits and put everything to bed, and want to go through just pretty much the recommendations. There we go. Again, just kind of want to shout out again the Pathways for the opportunity and really the funding of the plan itself through Blue Cross and Blue Shield grant. And today, we're just going to kind of, again, go through the recommendations. I can do questions as we go or at the end, kind of however you want to do it. This slide won't spend a whole lot of time on, but this is our entire process, which is why it does take close to a year. We really like to focus on the community input, which I think, as Justin said, we got a whole bunch of input as we went along in each of the 4 stages, including this one, where we've come back in front of the public and responded back with what we had. So now after today, you'll see step 4 is the final plan. The reason that the last step implementation is in orange, because that's the important one. Sure. That is setting the wheels in motion on putting this plan together, or putting it in place. Talking about the public input, these are just won't hit all the bullets here, but the different methodologies that we used to engage the public. So we did a survey. We looked at the demographics and trends, and I think one of the smartest things that we did working with our groups was to do some sub-area analysis, and that was 17th Street kind of was the dividing line, and then Main. So we had 4 quadrants. And some interesting stuff came out of that with the survey that helped us put the plan together and to set some of the goals and really to look at how we can improve some of the usage, citywide. I think we came through with 3 big kind of overviewing recommendations, particularly from the health perspective. And a lot of this was done not just through a park and recreation, lens, but it was an entire, healthy coalition, citywide and even countywide. The top one that came out was improve the active transportation and physical active opportunities are all around the connectivity of trails and sidewalks that kids, elderly folks cannot get to where they want to be through walking or even bicycling. Improve nutrition through partnered education programs, policy changes, and healthy food. So we did a survey even with grade schoolers on, their healthy habits of eating and physical activity and what have you. And the third was to increase social and health equity through increased participation, particularly in the lower income southern part of Hutchinson, where the participation levels are extremely low. Okay, the actual goals and action steps in the plan, we've broken up into 4 categories. Organizational goals was the first one. So goal 1, to enhance the organizational support of both the city and Hutch Rec, to continue this strong relationship that's working very well between the two, and continue the executive support for Parks and Recreation. I think it's working hand in glove now, and the ability to continue that, and this is collectively your plan. It's not a plan for Parks and Rec. It's not a plan for Hutch Rec. It's again that continuum of a healthy community plan. Goal number 2, to focus on partnerships to leverage health and economic impacts. First action step, work with Public Works to improve the complete streets, trails, and sidewalks. Again, that was the theme we heard in every case of our public input as a priority. Work with Hill, Reno County, schools, and others to address the nutrition. Work with downtown, the chamber, and others to help activate downtown. Create a sports coalition to attract and manage regional sports events. Track and leverage partners and partnerships for enhanced services. Continue to improve relationships with the different school districts. And continue and strengthen the neighborhood development program. So those were the big key steps to focus on those partnerships where not one entity has to do everything. The third goal under the organization is address staffing and resource allocations. For the city, it was addressed daily and deferred maintenance of park and facilities through reprioritization and increased maintenance contracting. So to look at where you're putting resources and try to create some resources in these parks that have some deferred maintenance issues. For Hutch Rec, it was addressed the deferred program analysis and evaluation through the addition of 1 full-time staff member. Fourth goal, improve marketing and awareness. Focus on the combined activities guides for inclusion of parks, zoo, events, arts and culture and trails. So you kind of have a one-shot place. And what we find in almost all communities, people don't care who puts the program on. They just want it to be nice and affordable and quality. So to look at that as that's the piece people kind of hang their hat on is now to incorporate all the positive things in there as far as programs and include the city's information. Develop comprehensive wayfinding and signage plan and program for trails, parks, and facilities. Again, as you look at the entire connectivity plan, to keep signage in mind so people know how, where they're headed, what's at the end of the trail, how far am I going, is it a loop trail, those types of things. And to locate particularly the newer parks in the area. And then add information to the city website on parks and facilities. Okay, the second area was focused on parks and facilities. Fifth goal, again, improve trails, connectivity, and alternative transportation. Our first action step would be to complete a regional multimodal alternative transportation plan, which would include sidewalks, streets, trails, those types of things. Second one, increase regional trail connections. Third one, improve sidewalks and on-street bike and ped improvements. Goal 6, improve existing facilities. Address the low-scoring park components and amenities, which we provided as a staff document. Jason and Sean have already indicated that they've pecked away at some of those as we've done our plan, which is why we do that. So we have one goal with a list of priorities that, as we visited every park and graded every component in those parks, there's a list of things that really need to be looked at as what we call low-hanging fruit. Implement annual park component inventory and assessment to identify the lower scoring components, so you kind of set up a system yourselves to evaluate those and put them on the list when they need to. Plan for regular replacement and upgrade of standard components such as playgrounds and picnic shelters. Plan or work for the neighborhood development program to identify, strategize, and implement improvements to the park and facilities in the lower scoring areas. Again, those many of the neighborhood parks that don't have a whole lot in them scored pretty low as far as usage and what have you. Create a feasibility study to determine the best use for Memorial Hall. Conduct a site master plan for Amdale Park and continue to evaluate senior needs and facilities. A facility study and plan for aquatics, which would be indoor and outdoor and citywide. And celebrate and maintain the zoo, Dillon Nature Center, and sports arena, which rank very high as far as facilities. New facilities and amenities on Goal 7. Add a regional adventure park. We've pretty much located the location out by Fun Valley where the city owns land, might be a BMX track, but also to marry that up with Fun Valley and as you'll see here, the second one, increased legal access to the Arkansas River, which would tie all that into some outdoor adventure. Add nature playgrounds in the other parks and create park and trail guidelines for the future development. So as Jason said, not a whole lot of new stuff, but this would kind of put you on the map regionally as something that's not offered. Actually, it's not offered in Kansas or even in the Kansas City metro area, Wichita and all that. So it's kind of like whoever starts and creates a nice big regional one is going to, probably be able to draw people from a lot of places. Next area is program and services. Goal 8, align program equity and availability in all sub-areas to all demographics and residents. One of the things we found was the usage in we didn't find a whole lot of need in the northern part of town where they wanted new parks. But we also found out that most of the participation in the southern end is from northern residents. and they're driving. So one of the aha moments for us was when we looked at the safety and the kids, do you feel safe? The parents, do you feel safe sending your kids? And it was high. So normally we would think, it's a safe town, people are walking everywhere. Next question, 75% of them are driving their kids to every event. So again, back to why people are asking for those trails. Track and promote participation in the southern sub areas, again, so you can see hopefully some improvement in those areas. Create opportunities for additional non-sports programs. We heard that. Goal number 9, increase citywide and regional draw programs. The biggest one was to add additional community-wide cultural and special events and create the sports coalition again. And the last session was finance. Always comes back to finance. Goal number 10, recognize parks, recreation, trails, sports, cultural, and events as economic drivers and quality of life investments. I, for one, would say that's one of the most important statements in however many pages this is. What we want to do is look at these things as not a cost, but they are investments. So 10 years down the road, you're not looking at the same thing of the deterioration, because now you're gaining ground on that. And as people support these things, there's an awful lot, that partnership, those usage, the donations, they start to come in because people are proud of what you've done and how they're maintained. The first one is fund facilities and staffing as outlined as an investment for quality of life. Address cost recovery at category level for both the city and the Hutch rec. Align cost recovery plan and policies. So again, you're kind of both on the same parallel as far as even a scholarship program, which is the last one. Promote equitable scholarship program to promote low-income participation. Again, as people look at, they shouldn't worry about, is this a city program or facility or a Hutch rec? It should be pretty cohesive, and I think you can do that by aligning your cost recovery. That's it in a nutshell.
Wonderful. A question, if I might, and it might involve others as well. It was in the section Goal 3.0, addressing staff and resource allocation needs. When you had it up there, you had mentioned a potential 1 full-time staff person for Hutch Rec. I thought there was an earlier iteration where there was also conversation about needing staffing at the city side.
There was, and I think initially we thought it was just a simple question to Justin and Sean. Said, what would it take? And the answer was, if I had 2 guys and a truck and equipment that just concentrated on parks, I think it'd be by. But as far as the how do you do the resource, the question then was, we might have those 2 guys if we go through a prioritization, kind of a work order plan system. We might have the hours to release them. We could contract out, some mowing or whatever to get them. So the resources are needed. So what we decided to do was, here's the resources needed.
Right.
That Hutch Rec was a little different. They said, we don't have the maintenance, so we know the programs, and we are just, we got the ideas, but we have no way to implement them, no way to track stuff and then make it happen. So one person to kind of be, that go-to that says, okay, here's how we're going to put it together was what was needed there. But on the maintenance side, it was kind of an unknown.
Sure.
And I
And
think
it might reveal itself as they start
Exactly.
implementing the roadmap.
And it might be that you need 3. We don't
Right,
know that yet.
as you go. Okay.
Hey, Pat, on Appendix D, page 175, 76, 77, you talk a little bit about potential alternative funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of interested in getting your thoughts in terms of the practicality of some of these, and there's a whole host of different options there. And what does your experience tell you as far as programs that ultimately have worked quite well and others that you just move on? So spend a little time on that if you would.
Well, I think it's different for every community, to be honest with you. We provide kind of a list and go through it with the agencies, and it's more of a process of elimination, which ones aren't going to work here, and then leave the ones on that have a possibility. Some of the things that I think
give us
have
an
worked.
example if you would. Give us an example or two.
Well, a roundup program. We see them all the time. We see them in restaurants. You know, I'm in airports where you want to round your meal up to the nearest dollar for this.
I see.
Okay.
You could do that for the scholarship program.
I
You can
see.
do that for, you know, golf. I've seen, you know, and sports complexes like Fun Valley. You know, there's you know, an extra dollar that you're given for the upkeep of the facility because we're raising money to make this better. And then you turn it around and that dollar might be worth $1 at the concession stand. So they're not out the dollar, but you get an extra dollar out of them for sure. Those are the types of programs that when people know the money's going back into what they like, they have a whole different attitude than the governmental black hole. So I think the cost recovery is probably the biggest thing. And if you can get it, what we're talking about is in categories. So the money made in, you know, at Dillon stays at Dillon. People are going to, you know, they're going to give more. So particularly as you look at aquatics and some of those things that need a little assistance, that cost recovery of how you set those fees and how you deal with maybe the folks that can't afford it. So I'm a firm believer to set it at the market rate and then don't turn anybody down and figure out a way to get them in there. So whether it's a scholarship program, there's a lot of models out there, particularly the school lunch program that you can model after that for those lists.
Do these typically represent hundreds or thousands of dollars or tens of thousands, or do they vary?
Again, you know, in metro areas, you know, I've seen scholarship programs that they keep $100,000 in the bank and spend the interest on it. City this size, again, if you've got, you know, $25,000 that you can at least get those kids into programs. I mean, that's big, I think. So I think things like foundations and the gift catalog, having, you know, fundraisers, those are all things that I like to say that if you really work at it, you want to create a list that's affordable for your local businesses, but create a list that they don't want to be left off of. So if you publicize in the paper quarterly the people that gave money to the Park and Recreation Scholarship Fund, and all of a sudden they're not on that list, but the next time they want to be on that list. So you want to create that aura. And that's been a really successful program that we see a lot. Is it's not so much nickel and diamond businesses, but to say we're really trying to, as a community, take care of the folks that can't afford to do these things, and we'd love your help, and start with $100, $500, you know, not with $5,000. And most of the time they're going to realize that, you know, maybe it's a good thing to show that I'm on that list, that I support my community. So those are off the top of my head things
Okay,
that,
yeah,
that I think work. And I think what we try to do
Helpful.
is put things in there that 5 years from now might make a difference, or might be one that you want to look at. So I think all of them are viable. We took the ones off that we felt definitely would not work. And again, work with the staff to, you know. So I think we started with well over 100.
Yeah.
I really appreciated all those suggestions. I thought they were some really creative ideas. And my particular question is about the endowment suggestions. John, does the city hold money if people wanted to donate? For instance, I know that happened with the animal shelter. We used to have just a fund. Does it make sense to set up a separate fund every time somebody wants to donate, or should we have some sort of endowment at the community foundation that people could donate to if they were interested in helping with the maintenance of parks? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, we've got a couple, you know, the animal shelter really is the one that comes out to me. We've had a couple large donations to the animal shelter. Some of that money's just been kept in reserve funds here at the city. The other one, I'm trying to think of the name. Is it?
For the
that's in a
trail?
That was a Gossage. Was it the Gossage? Anyway, it's in
Oh,
a trust.
oh,
The
the,
Gossage Trust. for
yeah,
the
so
Indian
that's
Trail.
managed.
Yeah, the animal shelter.
And I'm not sure that's through the foundation. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. I just
so
wonder
it's-
if
it kinda-
long-term it might make sense to have something set up at the foundation so that we're not creating a new fund
right.
in the budget for each person who would maybe want to donate. Just make it easier
Right.
for people to give money. to the parks.
No, I think that would make some sense. Sometimes it's easier for people to give to a foundation than to a city, you
Than to the
know.
mayor, yeah.
But if it's specific for, park improvements or whatever that might be, and that's set up, and, the community foundation, they're a voice for that, and, can point people to that, so.
Yeah, just something to consider.
Pat, the reference to Memorial Hall in 6.5 just kind of seemed to come out of the blue when I first heard it, and still strikes me that way. Talk some more about that, or where did you come from or your group in terms of?
Well, we looked at that as to what should happen there. It needs some help from a code perspective. It needs some help from an activity perspective. It's very underutilized as a rental facility, but it's a gem in our mind. So particularly as Teresa and Dave and I went around and Justin let us in there, I mean, we threw ideas out left and right, but those were our ideas. It's kind of like, I see this as an indoor playground, as zip lines and all this stuff. But the thing to do is now do the same process we did here, invite your community in and concentrate just like you would on the aquatics. I mean, we've got some ideas on aquatics, but so does the YMCA. So where's the next one go? In this plan, we're looking up here, but now it needs to be those specific items need to be looked at specific heights that say, now we're talking about aquatics for the next 35, 40 years in Hutchinson. Where should it go? What should it have in it? Should it be indoor or outdoor? Here's the cost. So Memorial Hall was one of those that it could end up being anything. We talked yesterday at the Hutch Rec meeting that you might even want to, combine a couple of those and include the downtown, the southern end of downtown Main Street into the, does this work from a feasibility study? What can this be? There's tons of warehouse districts in this country that are turning out to be the top-notch places for restaurants and breweries and arts places and sound studios and those. It's kind of that new millennium place. Mm-hmm. Does that work? What's the parking going to take? So it's a lot more details as to what that building should be, what your community would support, what they would like to see it be, and that way it's going to be successful. And you can look at the parking, you can look at do you totally gut the inside or do you retain some of that, two-level stuff? Because it could be just about anything. I mean, you could restore it as an auditorium kind of thing if you've got the performing arts to back it up. So it looked as it needed a lot more specific drill down for us to say this is what it ought to be, and we guarantee it's going to be a success. So there's three of them in there, and one of them is Elmdale as well. Should that be a senior park, and maybe an expansion of that senior center? That way you're concentrating on asking the public, and are they going to say no? Don't waste your money putting it. We want it as a neighborhood park, but a senior center in it. So those are the three things that we saw. An example is your Orchard Park. I was part of that feasibility study. So we drilled in on what that park should be. So the neighbors around it, that type of thing.
Pat, it seems like one of your kind of wow initiatives was the Adventure Park. I'd kind of like to have you kind of explore with us what some of the concepts that might be or you've seen have been considered in an adventure park.
Yep. Well, number one, we looked at it as, potential BMX bike track that is already kind of in the minds. But secondly, what we see is, and particularly when we talk with teens and 20-somethings, they're connected with the adventure parks, the whitewater rafting, the zip lines. So what we would see is and the ability to even put an RFP out and see they're being privately built everywhere and operated, and you get a percentage of the revenue, and if it works, doesn't work, they walk away, you own it. And at NRPA, which I know Justin and Tony both go to, in the exhibit hall, there's 3 or 4 of them that operate nationally. They will come in and do their own feasibility and say, is it going to work here? But I would see that as kind of a 3-level ropes course, challenge course. And what used to be primarily used as team building now is just fun. Right. And you can set it up as a canopy tree trail system. So what we liked was a topo. We liked the trees. We liked the ability to, you can, where your water slide used to be, you got the topo. It was perfect for zip lines. These are things people go on vacation and pay a lot of money to come do, and it's something that they travel to do. They'll I know people in Lawrence that drive to Colorado on a weekend to Jeep and zip line. But I think from amenities, I would see the ropes courses, the zip lines, tying into the 2 access river points for kayaking. Be whitewater rafting today. But
Yeah.
but then you can probably harness in some contractual rentals for kayaks during the summer, those types of things. You go into Southwest United States, I mean, just the inner tube, and somebody to shuttle them back and forth. People pay $10 to get in, float down, get out. It's just like another ride at the water park. But the ability to also tie that into Fun Valley as something to do when you come in for a tournament will continue to bring back not just the players in a van, but 5 cars with siblings and grandparents and stuff in it. But I think the other thing that really is a trend for these folks is all the Ninja Warrior type nature obstacle courses. And you can set them up to be self-timed, and people will come in and try to beat their last time. They'll try to beat the 12 and under time. So you set up a kiosk that has all the records on it. But also you can do those as events. You can do the mud runs, and a lot of this stuff is pretty low impact maintenance, because the muddier the better. The higher the grass the better. That kind of stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, yeah,
but
it's great.
Tying in those things, and again, maybe bringing somebody in that they could. I think the thing to do would be to kind of mark it off as to what, so you didn't have the first contractor come in and take the prime land for the zip line, so to speak. But just like you would with a water park, we might not be able to afford all this, but here's our footprint. Now, which ones are we going to do in what phases would be my suggestions.
Yep.
I have a question. In your experience, are adventure parks like that typically self-funded, or do they require city subsidies?
They're usually self-funding. They
And
usually make
generate
money.
revenue?
I know a few that were set up even with contracts that they gave back to the Park and Rec Department $25,000 a year to start with, or 10% of the revenue, whichever's greater.
I see.
And they're pocketing over $100,000.
Oh, okay, great. So it's all set up in kind of the operating agreement to
Yes.
benefit the city.
Absolutely. And who maintains it, and it's really their baby, and you would in the agreement, kind of hold their feet to the fire on opening times, and, we want you there weekends, like it's kind of like you would do with a concession. But they also know the prime times, and it might not be open, that many hours Monday through Thursday, or it could be appointment only. But birthday parties are huge at these things, and they'll drive. So I've done a lot of plans in Kansas, and DeSoto, Kansas, right outside of Kansas City, had a perfect plot of land out there. No electricity. The neighbors didn't want lights, all this kind of stuff. But they went out and they set up just a nature playground and an obstacle course, and it got to be so popular that it was kind of like, well, you've already started an adventure park. And as you start to look at it, there's none in the Kansas City area. So it's kind of like whoever puts the first one in and does it right and does it big is going to cancel out somebody else doing one. Because they're at least regional draws if you do them right.
Interesting.
Yeah, great.
Well, and I like the idea of, like you said, partnering with a private. This is not necessarily something that we're suggesting that we want to fully fund. There's some big ticket items or whatever, but because of the big draw, I think those private entities recognize that this would be a value to them as well. It is a for-profit for them, but it could also be profitable for the city, which then could be used for other parks and recreational type things. The other thing I was going to mention too, and that would be a new build, but I want to point out that a lot of your suggested park improvements were to work on the already built environment.
Exactly.
And that's a key thing I hear from a lot of individuals. Quit building something new, fix what we got, and whatever, and that is addressed in here
Yes.
heavily.
Yeah.
And some of these are not high-ticket items. It's staining this or removing graffiti from that.
Right.
And I'm sure Justin and Sean are prioritizing those as we speak and seeing which ones make the most sense.
And I would say also that when people see that kind of movement, again, they get involved. I mean, we've seen, some volunteer work where the Parks and Rec and the city will basically put an operator out there with their backhoe or whatever and get the materials there, and they've already got a neighborhood group that's coming for one Saturday, and they fixed the whole park up because it's a 2-acre park, and then they're proud of that, and they take care of it. But when they see things deteriorating, that's why we do here. Don't build something new that's just going to look like this in 10 years because you can't take care of this. Why add this? So once you start doing this, then the acceptance over here is a little bit better, and they're excited about doing something new.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're blessed with great volunteers. We have a bunch of community builds on some of our little park deals that we put together, playground equipment and such. So, I definitely want to emphasize that. And lastly, again, for my own, I can't overemphasize what you also pointed out. Recognize parks, recreation, sports, culture, and events as an economic driver and quality of life investment. I'm guilty of it. I know others. Sometimes when we're addressing the budget, poor Justin and his group, sometimes they're the first one to hit the chopping block. And I would challenge us as a body to look at it just like they're suggesting as a quality of life investment. These are the things that our city constituents are telling us they want. They want nice parks. They want to be able to walk safely. They want those things. So
it's definitely on high on the list of why people move or stay in a community.
absolutely.
And trails and connectivity is right at the top of that. So as people, they look at safety and they look at schools for their kids. I mean, parks, I've been in this business an awful long time. In fact, I've visited my old cronies in Kingman back where I was in 79 to 84 was where I started out of college. And it's the same everywhere. It's moved its way up to not be the first thing chopped because it's a luxury. Because now people are recognizing that, if you don't have parks, they're expensive to go buy and put in when it's already developed. So there's tons of agencies or cities that are landlocked that are just out of luck. So they don't have a choice but to fix up what they have.
Sure.
But you guys kind of have the advantage of doing kind of both of those, and with the number of school systems you have and the support of the county, I mean, it would excite me.
Absolutely. And capture, some people accuse us of one of our greatest exports being our children. They tend to leave. Well, let's see if we can't get them to come back. And if they're fond and nostalgic about what they grew up with and the amenities that were here, wouldn't they want to raise their own children and such? And that would just be another benefit to the community.
Right. I agree.
Pat, you used the term aha, so did Justin, and you mentioned the south end kind of being an aha for you. I'm curious, were there any other, whether they be big or small, ahas that came through your study?
Well, it's kind of all in the same dividing line, which we found out pretty quickly. 17th Street seemed to be in everybody's mind the one that divided the communities. Mm-hmm. So the aha of, first of all, demographically, the predominantly north side is baby boomers. Predominantly south side is millennials. Those are two different groups that want two different things, that think about things, two different ways. So if you do any hard research on millennials, I mean, these are the folks that don't buy things, they just rent them when they want them. They go on vacations with people in their cul-de-sac and they rent an RV. They rent a houseboat. They wouldn't own a boat or a camper like the baby boomers. And again, we do a lot of programs where, the what used to work, the old time fishermen sitting in the shade drinking beer, now we want jet skis, we want the whitewater rafting, but we don't own kayaks. We don't want to store them in our garage. They're the people that pay for their lawn to be mowed because they just don't want the lawnmower sitting around. They're also they'd rather spend their money on vacations and experiences than even have a retirement fund. So if you think about those two things, and then most of your resources down here where your millennials are, if you can connect, now realizing some of the millennials are in that low income that are, they're just worried about their next meal, so recreation's not even on their radar screen. But there's probably a lot of them, and then again, if you do some of those things like downtown and Memorial and those types of things that would attract that same millennial crowd that can afford the housing there, that can afford to put their kids in programs, but you got to let them walk there. They want a safe place to walk and not have to drive them anywhere. The baby boomers up here are participating in all the programs down here and driving there, and they're comfortable with that. So the two for me was the demographics, but then the usage, because it would say there's no dividing line here, because most of your usage is from north of 17th Street down here in Cary Park and all your parks down here. So it's not a dividing line for usage, but certainly if you can improve, the usage was very low of the southern that could probably walk or bike to Cary Park, to the pool, to that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you got some
You got some socioeconomic issues.
well, that and you also have, you've lost the luster at Salt City Aquatic Center.
Yeah.
Looking at those
Yeah.
numbers,
Yeah.
that's why we said, I wouldn't dump a lot of money into it till I did a feasibility study that said that, that might not be the right place now. But what is? Wow. Is it indoor, outdoor? Do we need lap swimming? What's the Y going to do down the road? So you invite everybody in and see how do we fix it for the whole city or county? And because the numbers are not good down there. No. And normally you'd say, well, that's pretty common, once the new wears off, but the new wore off a lot of years ago, and I don't think you're to the point where just putting a new water slide is going to revive it. It would have 15 years ago probably. So with that in mind, it's kind of all tied together with why people aren't going. Right. They used to, right. And your demographics haven't changed as far as household incomes. But it's just, I was in Kingman last night and they were saying, people used to go up to Hutch, but once you've been there, you've been to Cosmosphere, you don't go back. You go to, their aquatic center, you don't go back. And their gripe was our under 12s and under 10s and under 8s play all of our softball out of town. All of it. They don't have one game in town. And it's just interesting when you hear that kind of stuff. Right. And but it also kind of reinforced that we heard it right.
Sure.
And I think it's all approachable, but it's something you came into, and I when I hear dividing line, I'm hearing people don't go past that. And that wasn't the case. And then you look at the demographics, and here when you look at it, you can see predominantly baby boomer, millennials, and those are so different in what they want and how they get there and how they use things. And I think those are things that will be very smart things to keep in mind as you fix up parks. And that's why you want to talk to people about a specific thing before you just jump in, because, who knows, the baby boomers, whatever you do in Memorial Hall, if it's not what the baby boomers want, they're just not going to use it.
I think your scholarships that you'd mentioned also could help, possibly, if there is in fact some socioeconomic factors. Sidewalks is key. Accessibility,
Yes.
Safe accessibility to get down there as well is a barrier. I know you have to cross some railroad tracks and some other things that some parents might not be
Right.
excited about or whatever. So I think some of the things you pointed out might help with usage and
Absolutely.
things like that as well. Before you said like scrap it or try investing in another slide that may or may not putting new or shine back on it, so to speak.
Now, the Hutch Rec does have a scholarship program for usage of the pool, correct?
They
Because
do.
I remember
Yes.
using that when I was young. having
And
access.
some of the things that we came up against is, is the ability to raise those funds. There's a lot of competition out there,
Yeah.
and there is. But again, if you can create this as moving that up the list as importance to your business community.
From a marketing standpoint.
Marketing. And I think the worst thing in the world you can do is try to price things to your lowest denominator. It's all about, people perceive value based on cost. And there's so many studies that we've seen. The one I always tell people about is driving down the interstate in Illinois, and Abe Lincoln's birthplace was 2 miles off the interstate. It was free for all these years. Well, just like national parks, they got to where they couldn't afford to fix it up. They were going to sell it. They said, don't sell it, just charge an admission. So they charged $5 a car. They weren't kidding. They came right out of the hoop. Guess what their participation level did? First year it quadrupled. I mean, think about it. You're driving down on vacation, you see something free 2 miles off. It's probably not worth getting off the interstate. $5 a head, that might be worth stopping in and looking. So those are the types of things that we see that, again, with an investment, you want to create a value that makes it worth, taking that program, that admission. And you want them on the way out to say, boy, that was the best $5 I ever spent. Right. And when you get to that level, that's when the scholarship program takes off, because it's worth it. And that's when the low income folks will see, hey, that's worth sending my kid to, whether it's daycare, day camps, whatever that might be. And you got a lot of facilities that can start that ball moving with Dylan and, the golf course with the junior program. I mean, all those types of things. So I think it's a good fit.
Pat, if I might, I'd like to shift gears for just a minute. I really, really appreciate your insights here. But I know we're here to accept the master plan, but since we've got our two professional directors here, Justin and Tony, I'd really, guys, like to have you come forward. I'm sure you've given some thought to how do we get our arms around the master plan? How do we manage this document and all the various initiatives? I'd just like to get your thoughts, if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the park side, it's actually relatively simple. Since Design Concepts, they're a landscape architect group that came and went park to park, amenity by amenity, and gave us really a scorecard. So now we know where to start. Do we look at Bernard White Park? Do we look at Helen Bunty Park? So we really have a roadmap on how to start using the funds we have available and start making some progress on those assets that we already have. So for us, it's really a very useful tool that we're already putting in the plan. Sean and I have already visited about half of the parks with the plan in our hand and saying, okay, this is what they saw. It's like, okay, $3,000 here, $2,000 here, $10,000 here, and we can really make a difference in this community park or this neighborhood park. And so now what we're doing with that is we're building that into our park reserve ask every year. So you'll see this year as we get in the capital improvements that my park reserve has all these projects, and all those projects are directly related to what's in the master plan. So that's kind of the simple, low-hanging fruit. And some of the bigger items, the Memorial Hall, the Adventure Park, some of those, is I have plugged some of those into the 5-year plan to at least start talking about and looking about addressing some of those bigger topics. And then the final thing, too, really, is it really talks about the relationship between Hutchinson and the city. We have a great relationship right now. It's working really well. And if we can use that kind of as a model to then leverage other organizations such as Hill Reno County, lots of other organizations that can help fund and help be partners, it's another great thing out of this plan. It's just continue to give us that encouragement to work with other organizations. So that's how we plan to use it on our side. It's a little bit different, I think, for Tony's side, but I'll let him address that.
Justin, really quickly, so you're going to use the scorecard to establish priorities each year. So you already have in mind what you're going to be doing next year, and then year 2, year 3, but it's reviewed every year with council and...
Yes. Yeah, that's something we've talked about internally is every year about this time, when we're talking CIP budgets, to sit down with the plan with City Council and just review it. That, you know, this is how much progress we've made in the previous year. This is what we're going to be doing next year. And
Yeah.
Tony and I and our staffs will meet. I think we're talking quarterly right now, just to kind of go over it. Tony and I already meet once a week, just to talk about everything great in Parks and Rec. But really just to keep staff working on that document. So.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Tony?
Tony Finley, Hutchinson. Ours is maybe not as quite as easy to explain because there's no just go fix this. It's how do you get people engaged in using things. Briefly, we'll start with the neighborhood development program that's currently housed at Hutchinson. You know, that came through strong through this process to continue to develop that program, continue those neighborhood events. Specifically on what ties into the park is the work days. We just had a work day at Farmington Park where we organized residents to come out with the city's help to stay in the gazebo. And the Hutch Rec Foundation. So there is a place if people want to park some money. We have a Hutch Rec Foundation.
We have a location.
A little bit there. But we over the last 4 years we've been working hard to do that the right way. You're going to see a lot more publicity on that foundation, but we do consider that, and Justin's been involved with that. It is the park foundation for the community.
Now, can funds be earmarked within that foundation?
For sure. Yep.
For certain parks?
Yep.
So it's not really necessary for the city to establish its own, you don't think?
We can use what we have for sure. We're looking at an endowment. We're looking at how do we get to that level of endowments? And again, we're in the beginning phases. We just had a board retreat 2-3 weeks ago. So those things are exciting. One of the most recent things that foundation's done is they committed $2,500 to help the city plan a site plan for Farmington Park. So even though it's the Hutch Rec Foundation, it is intended to do all things Parks and Rec over time. So happy to talk to more individuals about how that's working and everything. But the neighborhood development program was key to us on how do we continue to grow that. The scholarships seem to be a topic of conversation. We do offer scholarships. It is a 50% discount, if you will. So if a program's $20 and you have the free and reduced lunch card from the school, that costs you $10. Right now, we self-fund that. So we don't go ask for money to pay that back for most of our programs. It's just kind of a lost revenue. So there's no going and asking businesses at this point. At our current rate, we're right under 10% overall of scholarships that are given out, but that equates to tens of thousands of dollars over the year. So there's a significant number of, I guess, amount of lost revenue, if you will, that's there. The other challenge that needs to be talked about in the community is, right now our facilities are full. When you look at this summer with baseball and you look at the 800 plus kids that are just playing in rec baseball, every field's full. So if you start influxing a new wave of kids into the program, now you've got a facility issue. Where do they play? We have 230 kids playing t-ball this summer. So that's a lot of kids,
That is a lot of kids.
and so there's a lot to that scholarship conversation. Not only how do you get kids engaged, but once they're engaged, where are they going to play? Where are they going to do those kind of things? Senior services was mentioned. Elmdale continues to gain members every month, more members. We're averaging right now over 100 meals served on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the senior center, and there's a strong desire to go to 5 days a week lunch services, but that means a new kitchen, new full-time staff, and all sorts of things. So there's a lot in there for us as far as that, getting people to use facilities, but we think we can work it and see what we can do.
Yeah.
Did that answer?
We've got the master plan. I would say from my observation over the last few years that the Hutchinson Rec Commission visibility has
Skyrocketed.
increased dramatically, your presence in the community and your visibility, and I compliment you on that. Hopefully, and this is a budget question, but while you're both here this morning, with the master plan itself and with your priorities and so on, hopefully this is a fair question. What might we expect from a budgeting standpoint over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of your budget requests?
Well, good. I don't know that I can answer that totally. We're in the middle of the process. I will point out that Hutch Rec mill levy, we have not increased that for 20 years. I think, 19 years. So we've been able to do a lot living on those assessed valuation, increases. And so I think that's important. And especially the last 7 years, when you look at what we've been able to incorporate with the third Thursdays, the special events, the fun valleys, the neighborhood development, we feel we've been very good stewards of the money, and we continue to do that. So we'll have to see how these budget numbers come out in the next month or two. I do know we can maintain what we're doing without any kind of increases, but if we want to do more, there's got to be a discussion on that. So.
Is your mill levy capped, Tony?
Well, there's no state cap, if
Okay.
you will.
Okay.
It cannot increase without your approval.
Okay.
So if there was any increase to what it's currently set at now, you guys would have to approve that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep.
Justin, any observations? And I know we're not in the budget process yet, but
Yeah, so to address your question about the next 3 to 5
Yeah.
years, from an operating standpoint, it's really just to key in on some of those maintenance issues. Originally in that first draft, I don't remember who asked the question, there was a comment about adding 2 FTEs in parks. I was uncomfortable with that statement, and so I asked that instead of saying that, let's really study how we spend our resources now. One thing that makes parks here in Hutch unique is that we have parks and facilities. So my crews aren't just maintaining parks, we're also maintaining this building and the
Right.
fire stations
Yeah.
and lots of other buildings. So over the next year or two, we want to track how are we spending our time. I mean, we already do to some degree, but in much more detail. How much time, how much of our resources are going to facilities, and how much are going to parks. And I think that will really paint a clear picture of, do we need to contract out more of our building maintenance and focus more on parks? Do we just need to add a couple people to help with parks? So I wasn't comfortable with that. At that statement of just adding 2 people will fix everything, because I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
So I guess the short answer is we're going to really study now that we have this roadmap, and now that we have a good list of what needs to be fixed. We're going to start tackling that, tracking our efforts, and then seeing what happens from there. So I'm not saying in 2 years I won't come back and say, hey, we've really worked hard at this, and this is how much progress we've made. But to continue that progress, we may need to add folks. But I'm just not comfortable with that statement yet. From a capital standpoint, you'll see in the 5-year plan, Memorial Hall feasibility study, also the Adventure Park for feasibility and design study are the 2 big things that are coming out of this as a capital standpoint. So, does that answer your question?
yes, it is. Thank you very much.
I
Tony?
do want to add, just real quick on kind of in that budgeting world. At the last joint work session we had around this plan, there was talk about how to work, continue the relationship and so forth. And the idea of a quarterly meeting was thrown out between the Hutch Rec Commission and the City Council. And, in my mind, that's a lot for you guys, because for us it's easy, right? Because we just do the rec side. But you guys have so many other areas. But I do think a twice a year scheduled meeting this time of year, maybe March, where we're going into the budget session, where we have a joint work session, so we can talk about what Hutch Rec's looking at, what you guys are looking at, and is there any way to collaborate better, going into the budget season. And then the other meeting would be in the fall, and it would be around the master plan, kind of a check-in where we're at with all of these initiatives. And so kind of 2 meetings a year where the 2 boards get together. As Justin said, we see each other probably more than we want to, but we meet quite often, and So that part of it's good, but I think getting the boards together on a regular basis probably makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense.
I would agree. Top of mind, and I like the two-meeting idea, like you said, budgetary and then a progress report, if you will, yeah. And then if warranted, special meetings could be gathered at any point too, so, very good.
A comment, I raised the question about Memorial Hall, and I'm glad to see that maybe it's going to gain some momentum. It's certainly not a surprise. I mean, we've bemoaned the state of Memorial Hall for a long time, and I'm glad that maybe this is going to get us off center. I'm disappointed that we needed somebody else to tell us that we need to get off center. But I hope that it does tip us and keep us tipping to take some action, feasibility study, wherever it might be, because that in itself is huge in this community.
Very good. Any other questions of staff or?
I did want to
Green
thank the Pathways and Heal Coalition that really helped kick this off. It's always hard to allocate funds for studies when we don't know that we're going to implement them 100%. And so just having that, the kickoff of having the funds available for the master plan makes it easier to move forward with it. So thank you very much for your support.
Absolutely. With that, is there any additional questions or a motion or?
Well, I would move to accept the Joint Parks and Recreation Master Plan as presented by Green Play Research, Education, and Development.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you all.
Pat, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Pat.
you.
We'll miss seeing you. Okay, good. All right.
There it is. Very good. We appreciate it. That must have been the fun one. Everybody's leaving.
Yeah.
You'll be right back. Okay. Next item, if you would, please.
Item 7B, consider build grant contract with WSP USA, Inc.
Very good.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. It's a little high for me, but
Oh, thank
now
you.
down a little lower. Jeff Peterson, Director of Engineering. I'm presenting an agreement with WSP USA to prepare the build grant, which is a U.S. Department of Transportation grant application for potential funding for improvements to the Woody Seat at Avenue A. And this kind of shows just a rough sketch or concept sketch of the potential for that area that was proposed in the TEAP study, or the Traffic Engineering Assistance Program study that KDOT funded with WSP for Avenue A and Woody Seat. So this kind of shows what would be requested at this time. So once we received the TEAP study at the end of April from WSP, the U.S. Department of Transportation put out their call for grant applications for the build grant. We looked at kind of what the build grant was and what its goals were, and we thought that this project actually aligned pretty well with what the build grant was to go for improvements to access, connectivity, and safety and transportation infrastructure in the city. So that being said, the build grant is a $900 million grant program throughout the whole United States. 50% though are to go to rural projects, and not one state can have more than 10% of the funds. So they're really trying to spread the funds out, over the whole United States. So that looked pretty good for us to at least put in a grant application for that. The city did request assistance from WSP because there's some cost-benefit analysis, safety analysis, and things that have to be included in this grant application. So this grant would actually, if awarded, could fund up to 80% of the cost of the proposed project, and the application deadline's pretty quick, so it's July 15th where this actually would have to be submitted by. As we were looking into this, I was going, well, that whole Woody Seat corridor is starting to need some work. If I can go to the next slide here. I talked with them just recently, actually just yesterday. I was kind of thinking, well, the Avenue C bridge was constructed in 1959 as similar to the Avenue B bridge. So, and it's getting to need some work, potentially redecking and things like that. I asked if they could actually, through this study, at least review the cost-benefit analysis and see if the rest of that portion of corridor would actually fit well with this grant application. So I did ask them if they could at least look at that. And if it doesn't, then maybe we'll only look at the top portion, and we'd still have to do work on the south portion. But getting rid of 2 bridges on the north portion would be of some benefit going forward for long-term costs as far as bridge maintenance. But we still have the 3 bridges to the south, 2 of which were constructed in 2004. But we do have the Avenue C bridge, which is starting to show its age and needs some work. But anyway, that I just thought potentially that would be of some benefit as we go into this, and we may include it in the grant application, and if it aligns pretty good with the goals of the build grant. But so anyway, with that, the proposed grant is an hourly not to exceed cost of $42,686.20. It would be funded out of the engineering department budget, which we have a line item for that. So it's recommended that we approve the contract with WSP USA in the amount not to exceed the $42,686.20 in hopes that we could potentially receive some funds for this work. Either way, whether we do this work or not, we're going to have to do work with the bridges along that corridor anyway. So it was it's been in our yeah. So
You read my mind, and I appreciate you emphasizing that, but you're suggesting, again, something's got to be done.
Irrespective of, correct.
The cost associated with just replacing it as is there a fixed figure if we went back status quo?
I believe, well, right now we have in the budget like $2.2 million.
Okay. So what we're looking at is
Or I can't remember, but for this year we have
for rehab.
for rehab.
Okay,
And
for
we
rehab.
started down that road of asking for requests for proposals and things like that. But when we got the TEEP study, and this looked like a potential option, we thought, well, let's stop here and at least consider what comes with the TEEP study, and because maybe it might, in the long run. I mean, it's a big cost up front, but it might save us money in the long term. So.
And that's why I was heading towards, and it sounds like, and from what I've read, that's the case. If we were to be awarded, and that is the big if.
It is. It is competitive.
Yeah. Then it would fund up to 80% of the
Correct.
cost. Okay. And then it can't be overstated either. If we go with this different look, it would remove at least 1 or 2 bridges from it, which would be an ongoing cost benefit.
Correct.
Paying dividends
So
in the future.
we just have the maintenance of the paved surface. We wouldn't have the bridge maintenance going
Bridge
forward.
maintenance, exactly, which, as we're seeing across the United States, is huge.
Right.
Cost associated with bridge infrastructure. Okay.
Jeff, are you indicating that there could be some additional bridges south of that highlighted area that would be?
Not removed, but we'd have to maintain.
Okay.
The Avenue C bridge in particular. And there's some minor maintenance issues for the other bridges, but the Avenue C bridge is one that comes to mind.
You're not saying there's some feasibility or potential feasibility to eliminate the Avenue C bridge, for example?
No,
No.
because it crosses the railroad, so we're pretty much, that one's a long-term cost, but
Yeah, okay.
as well
Yeah,
as the Avenue D bridge, so.
I think the question here, we just want to make sure when we talk with WSP that whether those additional bridges add to our project in a positive way.
Enhance the
Enhance the look of it.
application?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
Good
if
point.
it doesn't, and it's attracting,
put
then we
anything.
probably don't want to include it. And that's just something we'd have to deal with ongoing.
And so we're basically asking them to advise and consult with us as
On
to-
that
to that
particular issue.
On that
piece of
particular
it.
issue, but in the short term is complete the grant application so we can at least have the opportunity for funding. So, and that grant, they typically announce the awards toward the end of the year.
Right.
Jeff has mentioned the word competition, competitive,
Correct.
and I just really kind of have a sidebar question here. This is a huge opportunity for us. One of the biggest opportunities, I think, coming for transportation in a long time. I guess my question is that we get WSP to do the grant. But then what happens after that, and whether or not we can learn anything from our friends up in Hayes or other communities in terms of how we better position ourselves as a community. And I don't know what our latitude is in terms of a municipality, in terms of bringing our Kansas congressional delegation into the process itself. Whether we broaden our efforts in terms of soliciting support letters and so on. John, I don't know what's your thoughts. Have you given any thought to that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
But
certainly,
I'd like to have us explore that rather than just to, well, here's the grant application
Right.
and here it sits and we'll roll the dice and hopefully we get selected. So.
Yeah, WSP's got, experience. Obviously, they worked with Hayes on their build grant. We've been in communication somewhat with Hayes on their project. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Rather than just submit it, there's got to be an effort. Now, what that all involves.
I don't know.
What we're supposed to do, what, the letters, is that helpful? Is it personal contact? But we'll definitely have a plan working with WSP on that going forward. So.
Okay.
And they've had a level of success. They saw that Hayes
Yeah, they
project
did.
through.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we had 6 applications in Kansas last year and 2 got funded. And
Okay.
2 got funded in every state in the U.S. So, so our competition pool is basically, really, when you think about it, is within Kansas.
Within Kansas, yeah.
Kansas are going to apply.
I get you.
And it's not an easy process. And,
It is.
And so if you're not ready, and there'll be projects that were already submitted before that'll be probably resubmitted.
Yeah.
So,
But we're looking at a maximum of $45 million allocated to Kansas.
Well, yeah, probably.
And so we've allocated 2.2 this year's budget.
It is it's in the CIP this year.
So this would only cost us about 1.3 if awarded the full 80%.
Yep, but we haven't considered in the sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
In the council memo, I only at first only considered that
I see.
portion to
I
the
see.
north, so that might go up some, but
Which
at
is
it-
fine,
at
I'm just
but
saying
at an
that-
80% match, it's still relatively inexpensive in the whole scheme of things.
So we're going to go ahead and hold that 2.2 back until we find out in December if we are awarded.
yeah, we haven't done any bonding or anything on that part of it. So,
We have-
Okay.
yeah,
No.
so it's not money allocated just yet. If
Okay.
we did that project, it would be bonded.
Correct.
Okay. I agree with John. Very exciting opportunity.
Well, and it kind of came up right at the same time this study got completed. It's actually been only a few weeks that all this has been really out there, so.
I agree with that as well. And yet, Mr. Manager,
Yes.
I know we'll have impact upon a neighborhood, and I know that there have been some concerns raised, and could you, it may be premature a little bit, but I guess I feel like it would have been nice to have been able to talk to the neighborhood and get buy-in before we're taking steps that don't commit us. But if we make application and are awarded, we're sure the devil not going to say no to it. But so talk about that. So
We've started. I mean, I attended a neighborhood meeting in Southwest Bricktown a couple weeks ago on a Monday night. I think we've got another one scheduled here early in June.
Yep.
Just to talk about the concept, understanding what you're addressing. Time is of essence, and we didn't go to them with a engineered plan, bids.
Right.
Here's what we're going to do. What do you think? We went to them with what you see
Concept.
up there, the concept, and I think generally I've heard really pretty good comments, even from people that live on that Avenue B corridor that would have that closed off. But understand there will be some people that may not like that, and I get that. We really need to look at this overall as a community as to what's best for this community, with the idea that obviously we want to have that input. But going through this grant process doesn't commit us to anything. I mean, we're committing today to this, and so there'll be plenty of opportunity to have that conversation. Also, how we can enhance just the connectivity, that doesn't really have, if you look at that conceptual, there's a lot of connectivity improvements on Avenue A that aren't there today, that would help maybe offset the loss of Avenue B being closed. And so, there's a lot of different things we can do there, maybe input through those community meetings as to how we can, provide better connectivity. And, we've talked about overpasses and underpasses, and that, it's probably not realistic, just get that out there. We know what pedestrian walkovers cost, and so those will be things that'll come up. But I think there's other ways to address that connectivity issues with what we've got there, plus enhancing that as we go forward. So, but you're exactly right. There needs to be that, that communication, not only with the neighborhood, but with the whole community. I mean, this is,
That's a
this is a
biggie.
big issue.
Big issue.
And,
Yeah.
we've talked about it multiple times, radio shows and different things. It's starting to get out there. People start talking about it. I don't know what you all hear about it, but I hear, just basically, kind of interesting. I had never
Yeah.
thought of that. So, yeah.
I hear from a lot of people that as a community, we're not growing, and our tax base isn't growing. And if we have the opportunity to cut down our expenses dramatically by eliminating bridges, it's going to be to the benefit of our budget. That's the feedback I've received. And
Yeah.
I've heard positive commentary as well, informally, just in sidebar conversations with individuals. Some also don't want to dismiss the aesthetic of it as well.
Right.
It is a gateway, and we've been identifying our gateways for some time that they need some improvements. I would assume that with this, that would be a great improvement
Right.
aesthetically as well, as a gateway to our city, and it's highly trafficked, so that could put our best foot forward also.
Jeff, is there a reason why this is a single lane roundabout rather than a multi?
Well,
That was the only
I don't know
que-
that we've gotten that far since we're
Yeah.
just on a concept, but I think
Yeah.
in the TEEP study, it talked a little bit about a single lane only for the fact that it's easily more navigated by the common
Yeah.
person who aren't always familiar with those, so.
Yeah, well, I noticed the study, that's what they were recommending, was
And
a
it's
single. And
probably
I,
going to be based on traffic counts too. And,
Correct,
Yeah.
it would be based, and we do have some, they did take traffic counts in going through
Yeah.
the study,
Yeah.
so.
and our other two are single lane, and
And I was second to
knock on
ease.
wood, we haven't had any problems with them.
I get into 2 lanes and
I don't know where to.
yeah, I know, I know too, I've been in, yeah.
I struggle with
How to
making
get
sure
it
I'm not
figured
going to
out.
be
Yeah, one
doing
lane
something wrong in those
closed,
2
yeah.
lanes.
It's going to be in a Chevy Chase situation, going by Big Ben.
Look, kids, Big Ben. Parliament.
Well, as long as the semis can navigate it easily, to
Yeah.
me, that's the key.
it'll be over. It'll
Well,
be
right
over.
now,
It'll
they
be
don't- if
big
they
enough
turn
that
north
they can move without problems.
On Adams Street, they have to cross the 2 lanes of traffic and stay there before they even make the turn.
Yeah, it's not
So it's not a good-
situation.
It's
No,
not a
it's
good
not,
traffic safety-wise, good situation. It
horrible
never has been,
exit.
actually, so. And probably we have trucks that avoid that intersection on purpose now, and that it might open that up a little bit more going forward.
Okey-dokey.
But just to finalize that, Councilman Decker, we do have a date. I can't remember the date that we're
June
going
3rd,
to.
I think,
This
is
is
your
June
next
3rd.
meeting.
Okay.
I'm not sure
Yep,
the
and that-
time, but I think it's June 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll.
I'd
Jeff and
be
I are
interested
gonna
in
go
the
and
time
just
on that as well,
talk
when
a
you
little
know
bit
it.
about that.
I think it's like about 6 o'clock.
6
or
o'clock.
6:30.
Correct.
6 or 6:30,
Six.
I think. 6?
6? Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Well, I'd move to approve the proposed contract with WSP USA Inc. with regard to the Woody Seat Freeway project in an amount not to exceed $42,686.20 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item
Thanks, Jeff.
7C, consider code of conduct and civil rights fair housing policy required by CDBG grant.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. As you know, the city is a recipient of the CDBG grant for the renovation of the Stevens Building on Main Street. The grant is administered by SCED, and SCED has provided 2 policies for us to adopt this morning. The first one is the Code of Conduct policy. We do have a Code of Conduct policy in our employee handbook, but it is not as extensive as SCED's policy, and needs to be adopted to abide by the grantee handbook for the CDBG grant. The second one is the civil rights for housing policy. And this basically tells people who to contact if they have any questions or issues with civil rights or fair housing within the city. So the city recommends that we adopt these two policies to be in compliance with the grantee handbook.
Angela, I had a question on item 5D of the, I guess it would be the code of conduct. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that's not the one. Actually, on the civil rights fair housing policy, item number 1, the city clerk will receive all complaints. The complaint shall then be formally introduced to the city council at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Don't we have, isn't our policy for those complaints to go through the human relations officer?
It is.
And wouldn't this be confusing to people who had a complaint? That's my only concern about.
I think our thought was that it would be first taken to the city clerk, and they would direct it to the human relations officer, and they would address it and take the appropriate measures.
If a complaint went directly to human relations, would she just then let the clerk be aware of it so that we were in compliance with this?
I mean, Paul and I were talking about this yesterday. I knew that question would come up. You know, we have our human relations ordinance, and that's what we'll follow.
Okay.
This is there
Required.
to appease somebody, and that's kind of what we're doing. But-
Okay.
but
That's
Paul,
all I needed to
Paul
know.
explained it very briefly to me yesterday, but please don't use those same terms.
Yeah. No, that's,
But you're,
Yeah.
but
that's
you're-
all I needed to
No,
know.
I
I just
was-
wanted to make sure the public is not confused as
Right.
to who to report to if they had a problem
Yeah.
or complaint. Okay.
Well, I'm not confused, but why is it that what I think is a perfectly good policy and practice that we have not suffice to satisfy another entity?
I think it's because most communities don't have a human relations.
That's
commission.
exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have an
Understood.
officer.
But we do, and we have a policy and a practice that's been bolstered here recently with the addition of a half-time staff person.
It's called bureaucracy, Steve.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I object.
I know, but
I don't
that's
care what
what
it's called.
it is.
I had the same reaction
Yeah.
and said, why are we doing this now? We've never done it before, and research said, just do it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I agree. I know what you're talking about, and, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, we've got a code of conduct policy for our employees already.
know. I
That's
love
not
the
good enough.
way-
We've gotta-
We add layer upon layer upon
Yeah.
layer of red tape to make things more difficult
does
to
this-
These are
understand.
federal funds down to the
Mhm.
state, so you add another layer.
Yeah.
So did we have to do that because we got CDBG funds for
Avenue A.
East Avenue A about 4 years ago?
I think that some part of that may be that on the federal level, they codified their handbook basically of the requirements that federal grants have to meet. And I think after they did that, we saw this spur of new grant requirements to comply with that. So I think a lot of this had to do when they reorganized that. It's called an OMB circular. When they reorganized that.
And understand that we're bemoaning the rules, not the messenger.
No,
Angela.
no.
I know, I had the
Yeah.
same reaction.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, and it is additional red tape, but if it allows us to appease all the other entities or whatever, we don't have to go through this exercise every time just by having it on the books, then, it's not just SCED either, it's the Fed. And if we have this on the books, and that it does that.
Yeah.
I wish they had to abide by their own code of
There you go.
conduct.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Because I read it and I could name several who are not.
Right?
So will adoption of this code of conduct replace
Or
the
supersede.
current one, or does it simply act in tandem but supersedes, or what?
We had not planned on changing our personnel policy manual.
But we adopted,
we
it's
could.
applicable, and
And we can,
Let me speak to that for just a minute, and I promise not to use the words I told John yesterday. There isn't anything in these documents presented to you that is not already covered by our Human Relations Ordinance and Kansas state law. We will continue to follow both of those, and if you look at the last line of the Code of Conduct, what does it say? Well, do everything according to state, federal, or local law.
Yeah.
We've got it covered. We will do it. This is an accommodation to them so we can simply complete the grant.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just a hoop. No, it is. It's a hoop
yeah.
that you gotta jump through.
Any other
I
questions?
suggested we put it on the consent agenda, but I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions, commentary, motion?
I will move to approve the policies as required by the grantee handbook and authorize the mayor to sign.
It's been moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent,
No.
Dave Line,
Yes.
Solner,
Yes,
Pyrus de Carvalho,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
We needed a unanimous vote, by the way. There's a regulation.
You lost?
Super majority. Next item, please.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Jade, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Okay, I have a few items. Thank you, Mayor. John, let's talk flooding. So we
Why?
we discussed this in our study session briefly last week, but wanted to inform the public as to why certain enhancements that were made aren't improving the overall flooding situation in some areas of town. And one, this isn't a 100-year rain. This is like a 1,000-year rain. But also, you were mentioning that if improvements were made on the north side, but not on the south, you're not going to see, I guess, any kind of ease in the flooding because those pipes are still narrow. But I just didn't know if there was something you could speak to that would kind of explain the wider problem and how it'll be many years before we see improvement.
Well, I don't think this event's any different than any other event we've had. I mean, we've got the same streets. Everybody knows it's flooded, and within a reasonable time they're down. I mean, but as you mentioned, the relief that we're going to see long term was either holding water up north longer and releasing it, or opening it up on the south, and we've done neither of those yet. So, so there would be no reason to think there's any. Jeff, I don't know, any big improvements of what we've already done.
Well, I think in the public's eyes, there's reason because we tore up Main Street and did a lot of improvements, but there's no relief on Main Street. So
yeah, I mean, you can make pipes bigger, but they're running into smaller pipes, and so it backs up. So it really isn't you're not gonna see any big relief. And I'm not an engineer, Jeff. You may want to address that, but
well, when can we expect to see relief from flooding? 5 years, 10 years? I get this question a lot, and I just don't have enough knowledge to answer it thoroughly.
Can I also interject too? We were kind of on pause while we were waiting for the FEMA grant that we applied for.
We were.
Past tense. Because if that came in, that was going to prioritize certain activities. When that didn't come in, I'm certain you're right. Please.
We're in the process of negotiating a contract right now for some of the Cow Creek improvements that would potentially help. It may not help in some of these when we have the river and Cow Creek full, but we're negotiating a contract with a consultant at this point, and we'll bring that back to the council in the next 1 or 2 council meetings for that to get started on that detention area or extended widening there.
So that's a huge project to the south. It was the project we were talking about. Well, it's a little bit
It's
different.
one of the projects.
Yeah, one of the projects.
So
one of the three.
it's one of the downstream ones that then we could start building toward upstream that would start to help improving the situation. It's not a end-all be-all. I don't think we can fund that type of system, but at least it's a beginning of some improvements that we can maybe start to see some neighborhood improvements, or at least, depending on the event, a little bit of relief. Unless it's a really big, fast one or a deluge type situations.
Well, we've talked about this, and, I'll just reiterate it. We need to do a better job of communicating to the public what we're doing to alleviate this, because we have a hugely unpopular fee in place to help us alleviate it. It's not something that will be fixed overnight,
No,
because we
and-
let it go for decades.
And we have a master plan that really calls for improvements over 50 years, and we're really only funding it at about half or less than that for what was approved. So
I mean, a good
it's a
example
long-term
is
situation.
the project we just did over at, was it 9th, 10th?
Yep, it's
Roughly an $800 million
Maple.
project that was basically just fixing what was broke. I
Yep,
mean,
that
just
was Maple Street.
Maple, yeah. So,
Area.
$1 million on just that
Just
small little
repairing
project is
stuff that was starting to collapse. So
and we've got more of that. We've got the issue up at the hospital that happened last week, and so I mean, I don't have a great answer for you. It's not just going to open up and.
we are doing more internally, but in these types of events, it's difficult because you don't really see the benefits of some of these things. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think the comment Jay just made is that I think is the most important is we need to
communicate.
Continue communicating. Something that's not particularly easy to communicate, but yet just continue.
The public
and
doesn't want to
and-
hear we're working on it, but sometimes we
Yeah.
just have to say we're working on it and hear all the backlash so they know we're doing something.
Right. So, again, the more we can do to communicate, I think the better. And in dry times as well as wet times in this
Right.
particular topic.
This is a popular thing right now.
And, I'll say we're not unique. I can't even get to work in Bueller.
Right.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to have to.
There's a number of
I'm hoping I
communities
can
that are
get there
in
through
the same
Inman, but I don't know how I'm going to get to
Yeah.
work.
And
So
I
it's
think-
not Hutchinson only, but.
Right. I think the bigger message is, if you look at our situation today with the levee, diversion canal, and Cow Creek, if we didn't have any of that.
We're not flooding,
we would
you're
be
right.
underwater.
We'd be
We're not
Oh,
really
yeah.
flooded.
I mean, a week and a half ago it was obvious that if
Because-
we didn't have the diversion canal, the downtown, and I'm not sure how much beyond that, would have been underwater by, I'm
So
not
we
sure how many
shut
feet.
Cow Creek off, and the only thing that goes in there is localized, which is the flooding you're talking about.
Yeah.
The rest of it's going around us, out around us in the county, people are flooded. But, so that, that's, and part of that stormwater went to certify the levee.
The levee.
$1 million
And
to.
I don't think,
So-
John, that people even know about our
They-
levee system and what we put into that so that the entire town isn't underwater like it used to be in the 20s, 30s, 40s.
Right.
Yeah, we don't talk about it enough, but you're right. But I just look at it, like in these events and say, man, she worked this week. She's working and taking care of us. And but people well before us had the foresight to build that levee system. Not every community has that. And then the next
Or the
generation
GVI that
built
goes
the
around.
GVI, which is
Around the
another
community. That
addition.
provides
So I think Hutchinson and how we communicate that, even
Not to
though
say we don't
people are
have
getting flooded on
problems,
13th and Main, they're driving through it for a couple hours or whatever, we are well positioned with our flood control system and we have been for years, I think. But now we're dealing with this catch up and trying to, fix our current infrastructure that was built years ago with undersized pipes and so your question about when, it's many years down the road to see that.
The local flooding.
But we got to keep chipping away at it.
This is a frustrating problem, and I certainly concur with your thoughts, Jay. And I haven't given a lot of thought to this, but communication is the underlying, I think, issue. And I don't know whether or not it would be worth, and maybe we're compounding the problem by bringing more attention to it or more focus to it, but perhaps I'm thinking out loud, an open letter that could be crafted, signed by perhaps the mayor or our city manager to the public, maybe in our utility bill. How you articulate all of this, I'm not sure whether it just compounds the problem or not, but we're keenly aware of it.
Yeah.
There is a plan in place. This is our
It may not be better in any of our lifetimes.
yeah, I don't know if there's,
Yeah.
and Rebecca, you might have some thoughts too in terms of how you best try to communicate this real problem
And don't get
and
me
the
wrong,
fee and all
people
of
will
that
still
and-
be upset,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they still
Yeah.
need to know we're
Exactly.
working on it. I
Yeah.
think they'd be less upset to know that we're working on it,
We're
even if
working
it's unfixable.
Yeah. I've been trying to address some of the comments and stuff on Facebook, just going in and, you know, introducing a few facts when I can, but you don't really want to build on that too much. One thing I want to work with them on is some sort of infographic or simple, attainable way to understand where we are, where we came from, where we're going, just so people do see that progress. So that is something kind of on the docket to get done, so people understand that we are working on it and we hear them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Rebecca, go back through the historical pictures of Hutchinson and find some of those
yeah.
pictures of the
Yeah.
flood and put those up on Facebook and say, okay, folks, this is what it used to be.
Used to
All right.
be. There you go.
No, you're right. I mean, there's some big,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
tremendous flooding,
Hutchinson is-
yeah.
Hutchinson is flat.
All
There's,
of down, all of downtown had.
You know, I mean,
We all also bear some personal responsibility if we don't pay attention to what goes down the storm sewer drains.
Yeah.
Sure.
Blowing your clippings, not picking up
Right.
that piece of trash.
Exactly.
If you see it, it will end up in the system. Once it's in the system,
Good
it
point.
could cause a block.
And just some of the inlets that get blocked. I mean,
Right.
some of the flooding's just.
I'm
due to
not suggesting that
Because
is
of
the
that.
problem in its entirety, but
No,
it
it
only
is not.
compounds the issue. When I remember we took a tour and they pulled pool floats and rafts and
Yeah.
other items out of the storm system that was causing
God, how does that
blockage.
even happen?
So if we can be mindful about what we put or allow, and again, you may not be the litter bug, but if you see it,
Yeah.
pick it up because anything on the ground will end up in the system. It's just a matter of time.
well,
appreciate
and
your
just
insights, Jeff.
the helicopters off the maple trees.
Oh, sure.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
End up in
those,
there.
Hello.
Phil.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anything else,
Thank you.
Jane?
I did have one
Please.
other item that kind of rolls into another one. Sorry,
Thanks, Jeff.
belaboring the meeting. I was contacted just about an hour before the meeting by someone who was very thankful for the brochures that were sent out requesting that outdoor spigots be changed. Thought that was great communication on part of the city, but said that there was no deadline for penalty on that brochure, but people are still being taken to court if it isn't done. So I wanted to see if that was the case. And then I also wanted to comment on, or just bring something to your attention and get your thoughts. I was asked by a landlord last month to visit municipal court when housing violations were being discussed. So I did go down there on a Friday morning and observe municipal court, and I was very heartened to see that I felt our city inspector and municipal judge were very respectful and accommodating to people who had violations when it came to extending deadlines for fixing them, really understanding where they're at financially. But I was concerned because I wasn't aware of the extent to which our courts were being kind of bogged down by so many violation cases. And I didn't know if council was either. And John, I wanted to make you aware of it. And just, I'm aiming to better understand the process by which cases end up in court. Because I think when we all set out to improve the condition of housing, we didn't expect a lot of low-income people who were struggling to fix their homes get taken to court, and then they're having that added expense of court costs, which I understand, court is expensive to maintain, but you can't afford to fix your home, and so then you're taken to court. You have court costs on top of it. You're threatened with jail. I don't know how many people are going to jail. I hope
None.
none. I hope we never send anybody to jail because their house can't get fixed up. But let's say we did, because that is the threat that's on the books. Then they lose their job, and they're really in a position to not fix up their house. And I'm not saying anything's being done wrong. It's operating as we set it up. But I would implore us to search for maybe a better way. I know a lot of communities have an environmental court or a housing court. I've spoken with a few members of the Housing Commission about this. They're not real eager to take this on where they're working with rental registration. But I do want to emphasize that this was not just landlords, and this was a lot of residents of low means with their only asset being their home. And I just felt terrible about it. and I don't think it's what we meant to do. But John, when are we working with people before it gets to court? I understand we have limited manpower, but when do people get taken to court over violations?
It's really a last resort. I mean, we work with, all the time, because we don't want our people going to court either. But at the end of the day, the neighbors complained about something. We went there, well, you do this, you've got 30 days, come in, talk to Trent or whoever, yeah, we'll extend it. But there is a point in time where people just aren't going to do it, and that's basically the last resort. It's kind of the last hammer, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think that we do the best we can working with people to give them time, because ultimately the goal of the program is to clean these houses up, these
Yeah.
neighborhoods, and so there's got to be kind of that.
You have to have
end point.
teeth.
Yeah,
I
there's gotta be
get
teeth,
that.
and yeah, the court system. I'm sure they're full of these kind of things and probably just soon not see them. But the important thing is for landlords to just fix it. And that's kind of the message,
Yeah.
and most of them do. I mean, that's the other thing. We're talking about a few that don't, probably quite a few that don't. And has anybody went to jail? Not that I recall ever, and I can't imagine that they would ever get to that,
Okay.
That point. But the judge, I know he gives extension after extension
Yeah.
after extension because.
But it's such
he
a
doesn't-
waste of time and resources for the judge to have to hear that time and again, for our inspector to have to sit in there time and again, for that person to have to miss work
Yeah.
to go to court time and again. And like I said, most of these weren't even rentals. These were just residents with, I guess they're IPMC
Probably,
violations
yeah.
that were turned in.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that we lower our standards. We've got to get a hold on our housing stock and its deterioration. But boy, I don't want to see people who are in already a bad position financially struggling to fix up their homes.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that worsened with a burden that we put on them financially. I think there's a better way. I don't know what it is. We're not going to solve it during council comments. Just wanted to throw it out there. I don't know if we punt it to the Housing Commission. I don't know if anybody else has any great ideas, but I think we need to look at something different.
Just a comment, I think we, as a body, experience it a little bit when we're dealing with the demolitions.
Yes.
And some of the behaviors are a stalling, and we've seen that. Some are, as you've described, inadequate means. What strikes me is that you almost have to look at every situation to drill down to what's happening here. Is it really a limited means with best intentions, or is it a continuing to stall with ulterior intentions?
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. Because there were some in there that clearly just didn't want to fix up their homes and were upset that they were being asked to. We all know that impacts everybody around them and the community as a whole, so I don't know.
I mean,
what
I think it's a
the answer
valid
is.
issue, but
Well-
I think there's as many, as there are people there, there's probably as many different situations that just take, and probably the inspectors are the folks who know the story about the best.
I wonder if they would have an idea
Well, we
about
might
how
try
it
to-
could be
I'll
organized
try to see if we can
better.
get some numbers of the number of inspections and the number that have taken care of things before they got to court, so you can get a comparison. And
I
you
think-
might
I
be
think Trent
surprised. It
should
might
be able to do
That would
that.
be great, Jeff.
10 to 1 that are taking
Yeah.
care of it, so it's just these problem
Yeah.
issues here.
It
and
could just
ultimate-
be that I went on the day there were a ton, you
No,
know.
I
Yeah, and I don't know if it
Maybe
was hearing day or first
Yeah.
appearance, or first appearance, you plead guilty, not guilty, and then there's a process. But even the environmental court is the same. It's the same thing. I mean, you're going to have the same judge, or maybe not, but the same process and same ultimate end if people don't comply. But the Housing Commission, we're working on some ideas. As you know, the rental inspection program expires at the end of this year. So that's coming back to you guys within the next several months, and I think that'd be a great opportunity to kind of drill down into some of these, how hard do we want to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I think there's a good percentage of people that just do what they're supposed to do, get it taken care of, and they're done. And then there's others that have 6 or 7 cases in court just because they don't like the program.
Yeah.
So,
Does the inspector tell people what possible programs are available to citizens who are of lower income that might help them fix up their houses?
That's what I'd like to see
I mean,
more
do
of,
we
yeah.
do much communicating of, okay, now these are the things that are available?
I don't know what, I mean, to what degree
I'm sure
programs
they
we
don't
have.
have the
Yeah.
time, but.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
Roy Little was really good at doing that.
Yeah, Roy's does a lot, did a lot with that.
Mhm.
But as far as programs we have, it's, very
It's
limited.
limited, but, at
what's
least
out there, I don't.
there's something.
Yeah. But again, some of these aren't necessarily, they're just cleaning up
know.
your property.
I know.
There's not a grant program to haul off an old car and
No,
those kind of things.
there
So,
isn't, but.
That's a good percentage of these are just simple
Junk.
maintenance kinds of things that doesn't take a whole lot to fix. We've talked about a couple examples that one person said it was $15,000 to fix the siding, and it turned out to be $22 to replace and that's
Bad
all it was.
pieces,
Just
right.
just fix it. But I'm going to argue with this, and we're going to go to court.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the nature of that program. You all know that, but you're going to have that opportunity to revisit that and just kind of see where we end up with that.
I guess I'd want to know some of those too, that the severity of it again. There's certain issues that we identified that aren't necessarily life, health, safety issues or whatever, not to bring up our water fountain, or not fountain, but the
Spigot.
spigot, if you will. And if those things
Backflow.
aren't currently grandfathered, could they be? Are those things backlogging us or not? I don't know. And I could visit with Trent
Don't
about that.
think
as
so,
well.
but I those aren't things people are going to go to jail for.
Right, right,
so,
right.
even though you hear that conversation, so.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Steve,
Nothing, thank you.
John,
No, nothing.
Nancy.
No,
I wanted to once again say welcome to Ryan for staying with us for a week so far. That's good. No, but hopefully a long career here with us. So thank you again for joining us. John, anything you wanted to
A
say?
couple things, just heard back from a few on a potential CIP study session, June 6th.
That on June 6th?
8
What
o'clock,
county?
and that'll be really a first look at the CIP, and you can continue some of the conversation you had
Is
this
it
morning on
Thursday?
what that looks like.
8
8 a.m.
my favorite time of the day.
June
Does that
6th
seem to work for everyone?
Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
myself.
works great.
And we'll get,
Yes, I'm sorry.
okay, we'll get a packet.
Yeah, I think that'll work.
We'll get a packet sent out ahead of time with the list plus the individual projects that are
Okay.
being
I
proposed.
knew I'd done something. I put it on my calendar already. I just
did
hadn't
too.
told you it was
I
okay.
did.
Yeah.
Do you have other planned meetings off of council on the budget
Not,
that you're looking at?
not necessarily yet, and
Not yet,
I
okay.
suspect those will all probably be in the month of July. I mean, I can go ahead and look at some of those.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be kind of nice to get a summer schedule.
You might get the proposed budget and say it looks good and just approve it. So, could happen.
Wishful thinking.
June 6th.
One other thing, I sent out a note I was going to bring up today. We had a request from the Quail Ridge subdivision ownership group about, again, here, a reduction in the current letter of credit.
Yeah.
And, you recall we did this in Oxford Point. We released the letter of credit early. That was based on a set of circumstances where I think we had 5 houses built out of 20-some lots, 22 or 3, but the school district had purchased 9 of those lots, and so there was a thought that they were a pretty good risk, to pay those specials because they'll keep paying the specials there. And so this particular request, again, I went back and looked, and we probably got 4 other specials out there, and what I worry about is opening that floodgate as to what it is we're going to do. I mean, when you look at our policy, we're only requiring 35%. 35% of the total cost, that's all we're requiring. So if that thing goes belly up, we're only protected by 35%. And so, it's not like we're asking for 100% letter of credit to cover all the cost. And so I just wonder, today is whether you want me to put this on the agenda for approval, consideration of approval to the request of reducing the current letter of credit, which there was no specific request. How we come up with that based on the number of lots built, or houses built. So I guess before we put this on the agenda for formal consideration, I just wanted some consensus that there's some interest in that, or is there interest in following our policy the way it is, which is pretty common policy around the state and nowadays, people requiring that letter of credit. In a sense of what it does, it protects us that if those people that own those lots don't pay the specials, that's us. We're going to eventually pick that up. So
So they wanting a partial release? I don't
yeah,
remember.
partial
Yeah,
release.
partial
Yeah,
reduction.
Partial release.
and I can bring
if
back
so,
all the details.
I don't think
what
he's,
does
I
that-
don't think
he didn't specify
did
what
he?
that
Well,
partial is.
the current letter of credit on file now is $340,000. There's essentially 5 houses built, 4 now, 1 being built out of 27, which represents about 18.5% build out. So it's not 35%, it's 18.6%. And so the issue is, would you reduce that 340 by, 18.6%, something like that. You just reduce you're not releasing it, but you just reduce it. Now, again, our policy doesn't address any of that. We've never really ever done that, that I'm aware of,
But
other
we did
than
for
Oxford.
Oxford Point.
Yeah, and we released that one completely.
Our threshold was, if you can get to 25%, we'll look at it.
We
That's
kind
kinda
of
what
talked
we did.
about
Yeah,
that.
it's not- yeah.
Yeah.
Once they got to the 25%, so there was some motivation on their part, if I can get to that 25%.
And that was kind of the interesting thing when we talked the last time, that our policy requires either 25% cash deposit or 35% letter of credit. And
Yeah.
I never could figure out what's the difference.
What's the difference?
And talking to the banker, I mean, they're both cash. I mean,
Cash.
they're really,
Good as.
but the banker said, cash is gold. So whatever that means,
I
but,
see.
the bank's still on the hook for that. So there is a question of whether that should even be, and maybe that's what we talked about, the 25%. But I think our policy at the 35% letter of credit is still pretty sound,
pretty
pretty
sound.
competitive around, because you're, again, the city's at risk on
Right.
these, and unfortunately, fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, we don't
Right.
have a lot of
No.
big development out there.
And I don't know that the Oxford Point is the same animal. We had some assurances with USD 308 that they were
Right.
building those out and have a proven track record of building those homes out. So I know at least that was a consideration for me when I considered that at the time, knowing that they would be building those out. And witnessing it. They're finishing up one right now, and I'm sure they'll start one at the next school year.
Right.
Yeah.
Similar, if this request came to the same level as the Oxford Point, I think I'd be open to seriously considering it. It seems to me it's quite a ways from that, and I really don't have much interest given that.
Maybe if
that
they
kind of
got-
gap.
To the
And-
20, so I would be in favor if it got to that 25%.
That's what I am too.
Yeah,
I'm
that's-
okay if they get to
Get
the
it to-
25%.
Why don't I
That gives
have that
them some
conversation
motivation
and
to
see where
say,
we're at
yeah,
there, and
let's
that you get to that point.
Find that threshold of 25%.
And I'm curious where the other 3 that are in development are now.
Well, I tell you, I've
It
got
said
some,
6 house under construction this summer. Is that what it said?
No, I mean the
Oh, you're talking
other,
the other projects.
Yeah.
the other
like Monarch
projects
Meadows, that's the one up,
near Dillon's.
yes,
About
yeah.
Dillon's.
And, that build out was, there's 13 lots in that last phase, and they've got 2.
Yeah.
So they would need
4.5,
several
5.
more, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, Kissawah North, second edition, 1 out of 8, so.
Gotcha. So there's still a way.
Just one
Yeah,
more.
and then the other one we had on there was the Family Entertainment District, it was the Strike Development, that's the bowling alley. And they did specials only on water and sewer, which was only about $100,000
Yeah.
for that entire project, just so they could spread those costs out to all those lots, even those that are undeveloped.
Gotcha.
So, we can look at that, I'll communicate that, the 25% level, and then come back to the council at that point.
At that point, yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like it.
I would request an executive session, notes are not on the agenda, to recess into executive session pursuant to the confidential data related to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships, exception KSA 75-4319B4 in order to discuss confidential data related to financial affairs of a business enterprise. The open meeting to resume in city council chambers at 11:45.
So
So
moved.
So,
I-
A lot of movement. Any seconds?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Wants to avoid buying us lunch. So he says 11:45.
no, that's
He
okay.
says
I got- I
11:45,
gotta
we're going to be there till
somewhere.
12:30.
Did you get what you needed, Linda?
Yeah.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Decker?
Yes.
Dave Long?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Iris DeCarvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. I think I'm going to adjourn to facilities right quick.